Prime Minister's second day of his visit to Egypt. This is a state visit, and he'll also be holding talks with the Egyptian leadership. In fact, this will also include President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Remember, the two nations are seeking to enhance their strategic and trade partnership. The Prime Minister is visiting at the invitation of Egyptian President el-Sisi, and this is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Egypt in nearly 26 years. The Prime Minister began his visit, in fact, with discussions with the Egyptian Prime Minister and also top cabinet ministers. Now, trade is, of course, the big focus, but also the bid is to strengthen strategic partnership with the North African country. Now, in his first engagement, the Prime Minister held a meeting with the newly set up India unit at the Egyptian cabinet, headed by the Prime Minister there himself. Discussions are focusing on trade, as I mentioned, and also investment. And Egypt is expected to invest a great deal in India now, and also renewable energy, green hydrogen, IT, digital payment platforms, pharmaceuticals, and also the big focus is on people-to-people ties. So, of course, the big focus is on trade and strategic cooperation. I'm being joined by two guests to talk about this crucial visit as far as the Prime Minister's two-day state visit to Egypt is concerned. Dr. Wael Awad, senior international independent journalist, and also joining me, Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat, somebody who has served 4 years in Egypt as well, and also in other Arab countries. Thanks so much to the both of you for joining us on the broadcast this morning. Former diplomat Prabhu Dayal is with us on the broadcast. Mr. Dayal, coming to you first, because this is being seen as a game changer for India-Egypt ties. Of course, it's also expected that this will dramatically increase India's investment in Egypt. But at the outset, Mr. Dayal, why is it being seen as a game-changing visit? Why the renewed focus on Egypt? Why is Egypt important for India, given the fact that PM Modi is the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Egypt in decades, and also this comes just less than 6 months after the Egyptian president's visit in January to New Delhi. So why this renewed focus really on Egypt? Why is it significant?
Well, it is significant first and foremost because, as you pointed out, it is the first bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Egypt since 1997. There was, of course, a visit by Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh in 2009, but that was for the NAM summit. So bilateral visits are on a different plane altogether in diplomacy. On the other hand, President al-Sisi has visited India thrice in recent years. So it was very important for India to reciprocate in order to show that we attach a lot of importance to Egypt. Of course, we invited President al-Sisi as the chief guest to our Republic Day celebrations.
Right.
We have also invited Egypt as a guest country to the G20 summit. So these are gestures which are very meaningful in themselves. Now, why is this visit significant in terms of content?
Right.
Firstly, Egypt has a very, very important strategic location. It is situated at the crossroads of Asia, Africa, and Europe. It controls and owns the Suez Canal,
right,
through which all the maritime traffic from the Red Sea goes to the Mediterranean Sea. So the geostrategic significance of Egypt cannot be lost on anybody.
Absolutely.
Let me mention that Egypt has recently set up a very important port on the Red Sea, and that is the port Bernisi. Right. And that port can play a very significant role in regard to the Western Indian Ocean, where India has significant interest, and where China has been expanding its role and threatening what may be our legitimate interests in that region. So the geostrategic importance of Egypt is very much there. Secondly, Egypt and India are working closely together on the issue of global terrorism. Let me mention that India and Egypt have set up a joint working group on terrorism, which met after President al-Sisi's recent visit in January.
Right.
And this working group sent out a very clear message that we two countries will not tolerate state-sponsored terrorism.
Absolutely. And also, Mr. Dayal, that crucial point you were making about how it's very significant geopolitically, given the fact that Cairo can also be a gateway to major markets in Africa and Europe. So that's very significant. But also, Dr. Dayal, coming on the point of how this could also potentially pave the way for Egypt's entry into the BRICS economic bloc. That is also something that's being seen, watched very closely globally. How is this going to benefit India?
Well, I think the benefit will be very significant, especially in terms of India investment in Africa and also in Indian access to the Western market through the Suez Canal. So there will be a very important role for India to play geopolitically and also on the global scenario, where we will see India is being seen as an alternative route for the trades from the Chinese way, of which they're trying to promote the Road and Belt initiative by Xi Jinping since 2013. So I think the Americans are playing a major role also in bringing these countries together. Having said that, I would say also India recently have noticed that they have been away for decades from the African continent. So now they are back into the African continent. And I agree with Ambassador Prabhu, especially when he mentioned the geopolitical importance of Egypt, that will be of a great significance for Indian trade and also investment. Let us remember also that Indian capital surplus has been also increased and India is willing to invest. So I think it's economy, which is the prime importance. And secondly, that two civilization is this in Egypt and India, and they enjoy the historical ties. And I think it's good and significant as well that we should link our history with the current contemporary history, where they can be cemented into a better relation. Egypt is the largest populous Arabic state. It's an Arab state. It's an African state. It also plays a major role in the Arab affairs. So I think the more India gets closer to Egypt, the less will be a problem for India internal affairs, especially when it comes to relation or resentment or some stringing, ties with the Arab world and some sort of apprehension about the internal affairs. So I think that also has a very significant. Therefore, the visit should be seen from different prisms of economy, politically, and also culture.
Right, Dr. Awad, that the point you were making about how India and Egypt have shared historical ties as well. In fact, there's a shared history of non-alignment from power blocks as well. Ambassador Dayal, coming on this point of how this will, in a sense, help India to emerge more strongly as a voice of the global South, given the fact that now India is leading the G20 presidency. So, in that context, how is it going to help India globally?
Well, it's very important for India to establish closer relations with other major countries of the global South. And without doubt, Egypt is one such country. Egypt is not only strategically located, it is also the largest Arab country in terms of population. It has the largest army in the Arab world, and it plays a very important role in Middle Eastern politics. So it's important for India to have a good relationship with Egypt, which it has always had, but then, a relationship should never be neglected. It should be nurtured further. I may also mention that Egypt has also steadily maintained a policy of neutrality in the Russia-Ukraine war. Egypt has refrained from taking sides, which is exactly what India itself champions, and I think there is some meeting ground there. Then, of course, India is working very, very assiduously to develop closer relations with a whole host of other Arab countries. Saudi Arabia, for instance, or UAE, Kuwait, the Western African countries, Morocco, for instance. Now, it is important that we have a very, very substantive relationship with such a key Arab country, with Egypt. Now, you outlined the areas where such cooperation can grow. Of course, There is the strategic cooperation, but that includes cooperation in the area of defense. Egypt, as I said, has the largest standing army in the Arab world, but then it needs defense equipment.
Right.
It has been relying on the United States and other Western countries. But, Egypt is going through a very tough time financially. So it needs to procure good weaponry, but at cheaper costs, where
Right.
India is a very viable alternative.
Right.
Then there are the areas of investment. Egypt is trying to increase foreign investment. And on the other hand, India is now in a position to invest in a whole host of countries. And Indian industrialists are already present in Egypt as investors.
Right.
There is bilateral trade. Egypt is going through, as I said, a tough time, and it has problems of food security. There are pharmaceutical needs. There are a whole host of areas like information technology, education.
Right, and
Where
very
the
significant
two
how you
countries
pointed
can
out
work
that
together.
Egypt, of course, is also going through its own food crisis, etc. Ambassador, and Dr. Awad, come in on this point, because we saw that how India, even though when it had a cap on wheat exports, it stepped in to help Egypt, crisis-ridden economy of Egypt. So, the spectacle of the most important Arab country, in a sense, standing by Modi's India. How is that spectacle significant for Prime Minister Modi's own image?
Well, I think recently the Prime Minister's or Indian image has been tarnished in the Arab world and Islamic world because of certain elements within the Indian society who is trying to spoil the diversity, multi-diversity of India and multi-ethnic roots, and they have attacked certain minorities. So therefore, there was significant changes, and I think the vested interest nations took full advantage of it to spoil India's image. But I think with the Arab world, the Gulf state and most of the Arab world understanding India's diversity and keeping in mind the deep-rooted relation, these have been washed away, and such kind of visit will also ascertain that India remain and will be always a multi-ethnic and a multi-diverse society where will be all the Indian will be playing a major role in any kind of political or decision making.
Right.
So when you have a prime minister making just a visit to certain religious places, I think also it gives a message, especially India going for election next year. And this also will give internal message, because let us remember that the Muslim organization was the strongest in Egypt. And Mohammed Morsi, the former president, when he took over, he played a major role in promoting in the Arab Springs destabilizing the Arab. I think when you focus on the secular India and secular Egypt, it's of a prime importance, not only for the two countries, but for the rest of the world.
Absolutely. So very important messages there in the Prime Minister's crucial two-day state visit to Egypt. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us on the morning broadcast.